December 22nd, 1944, 11:30 a.m., Bastogne, Belgium. 4 German soldiers approach the American lines, waving white flags. They're carrying a surrender ultimatum. The senior officer, Major Wagner of the 47th Panzer Corps, expects the surrounded Americans to capitulate within 2 hours or face total annihilation from 6 heavy artillery battalions. Inside the bombed-out town, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe reads the demand. He crumples it into a ball, throws it in a wastepaper basket, and mutters 2 words: "Aw, nuts." His officers scramble to write a formal reply. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kennard speaks up. "General, that first crack you made would be hard to beat." McAuliffe looks at him. "What did I say?" "You said nuts." Everyone laughs. McAuliffe nods. A sergeant types up the official response. "To the German commander, nuts, the American commander." The confused German officers ask if the reply is favorable. Colonel Joseph Harper, delivering the message, responds in plain English, "Go to hell." This is the story of how 14,000 surrounded American soldiers, freezing, outnumbered 5-1, running out of ammunition and food, held a critical Belgian crossroads town against the entire German Fifth Panzer Army. It's about ordinary soldiers performing extraordinary acts of courage, ingenuity, and defiance. And it starts 6 days earlier, when nobody believed the Germans could attack through the Ardennes forest in winter. This is the Siege of Bastogne. December 16th, 1944, 5:30 in the morning, the Ardennes forest region of Belgium. Over 1,600 German artillery guns open fire simultaneously along an 80-mile front. The ground shakes. Trees explode. American soldiers in their foxholes think it's the end of the world. After 2 hours of bombardment, 200,000 German soldiers and 1,000 tanks pour through the Ardennes forest in what Hitler has codenamed Operation Watch on the Rhine. It's Germany's last major offensive of World War II, a desperate gambit to split American and British forces, capture the Belgian port of Antwerp, and force a separate peace so Germany can focus entirely on the advancing Soviet army from the east. The attack achieves complete tactical surprise. Allied intelligence had deemed a German offensive through the Ardennes impossible. The terrain was too difficult, the weather was too bad, the Germans were too weak. Intelligence was catastrophically wrong. The thin American defensive line in the Ardennes crumbles under the German assault. The 106th Infantry Division, which had been in position for only 5 days, is overrun. Within 48 hours, over 8,000 American soldiers surrender, the largest mass surrender of U.S. forces in the European theater. But the German offensive has a critical vulnerability: logistics. German tanks are running on captured American fuel. Their supply lines are stretched. And to reach Antwerp before Allied forces can regroup, they need to capture the road network quickly. All 7 major roads in the Ardennes region converge on one town, Bastogne. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, immediately grasps what's at stake. On December 17th, he orders the Schaeff Reserve, the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, to deploy immediately to the Ardennes. The 82nd goes north to block Kampfgruppe Piper. The 101st goes to Bastogne. The 101st Airborne Division, the famous Screaming Eagles, had been resting and refitting at Camp Mormelon near Reims, France. They'd fought through Normandy and Operation Market Garden. They'd earned a rest. Instead, at midnight on December 17th, they're loading onto trucks in freezing rain for a 107-mile race to Bastogne. Most soldiers don't have winter clothing. Many are nursing wounds from previous battles. Some are replacement troops who've never seen combat. Their temporary commander is Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe. The division commander, Major General Maxwell Taylor, is back in Washington. The assistant division commander is in England. McAuliffe, the division artillery commander, is filling in. He's 46 years old, West Point class of 1918, an artilleryman, not a paratrooper. His men call him Old Croc or General Mac. He has a reputation for calm leadership and creative problem-solving. He's gonna need both. The 101st travels through the night in open-bed trucks. It's snowing, the temperature's below freezing. Soldiers huddle together for warmth. Nobody knows exactly what they're heading into, but they can see the orange glow of artillery fire lighting up the horizon. They arrive in Bastogne on the morning of December 18th, just 4 hours ahead of the leading German forces. Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division is already there, along with remnants of other units that had retreated from the initial German assault. McAuliffe quickly organizes a defensive perimeter around the town. The 101st takes positions to the north, east, and south. The 10th Armored provides mobile armored reserve. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion sets up to counter German tanks. The perimeter is roughly circular, about 9 miles in diameter. It's not a strong position. There are gaps. The terrain provides limited cover. But it's what they have. On December 19th, the first German probing attacks begin. McAuliffe sends the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment forward to develop the situation. They engage Panzer Lehr Division in an all-day firefight near the villages of Majoret and Longvilly. By December 20th, Bastogne is completely surrounded. The Germans control all 7 roads leading into town. They have the Americans outnumbered 5-1. They have air superiority. The weather is too bad for Allied planes to fly. And they're confident the surrounded Americans will surrender within days, if not hours. What the Germans don't know is that they're facing the 101st Airborne. These soldiers had parachuted behind German lines on D-Day. They'd held Hell's Highway during Market Garden. Being surrounded isn't new to them. It's practically their specialty. As one paratrooper would later say, "We're paratroopers. We're supposed to be surrounded." The Defense, December 19th to 22nd, 1944. Let's talk about what it was actually like inside Bastogne during those first days. The average temperature was 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Most soldiers didn't have winter clothing, just their standard wool uniforms and field jackets. They dug foxholes in frozen ground that was hard as concrete. Some positions were nothing more than shallow scrapes in the snow. Ammunition was rationed. Artillery batteries were limited to 10 rounds per gun per day, a fraction of normal usage. Machine gunners were told to fire in short, controlled bursts. Riflemen were instructed to make every shot count. Food was scarce. The 101st had deployed so quickly that supply units hadn't caught up. Soldiers were eating 1 K ration per day, 1,200 calories, barely enough to sustain a man in combat. Some units shared a single can of hash among 10 men. Medical supplies were critically low. The division medical company had been nearly wiped out in a night raid on December 18th. The remaining medical staff set up aid stations in a bombed-out church and a few cellars. They performed surgeries by candlelight with no morphine. And the Germans were attacking constantly. The German plan was to reduce Bastogne through a series of coordinated assaults from multiple directions. They committed elements of 4 divisions, the 2nd Panzer Division, Panzer Lehr Division, 26th Volksgrenadier Division, and later the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division. But what the German commanders didn't account for was the 101st's artillery. McAuliffe had been an artilleryman his entire career. He understood artillery tactics better than almost anyone in the Armenian army, and Bastogne's circular defensive perimeter created a unique tactical advantage. American artillery positioned at the center of the circle could fire in any direction and hit targets attacking from any angle. When Germans attacked from the north, every artillery battery in Bastogne could mass fires on that sector. When the attack shifted to the east, the guns simply rotated their aim. The Germans were attacking sequentially, one direction at a time. The Americans were defending with concentrated firepower from all their guns simultaneously. This is called massing fires. It's Artillery 101. But the Germans apparently hadn't expected the surrounded Americans to execute it so effectively. On December 19th, a German assault toward the village of Noville was met with concentrated artillery fire that destroyed 30 German tanks and killed an estimated 600 to 800 German soldiers. Major William de Soubry's task force held Noville for 2 days before withdrawing in good order. On December 20th, German forces attacked the eastern perimeter near the village of Marville. American artillery and tank destroyers stopped the assault cold. On December 21st, Germans attacked from the west and southwest. Again, concentrated artillery fire broke up the attack before it reached American lines. The pattern was clear. The Germans could mount local attacks, but they couldn't coordinate simultaneous assaults from multiple directions. And as long as American artillery had ammunition, they could defeat attacks one at a time. But ammunition was running dangerously low. By December 21st, artillery units were down to single-digit rounds per gun. Tank destroyers were rationing anti-tank ammunition. Infantry companies were collecting ammunition from casualties to keep fighting. And the weather remained terrible. Thick clouds, fog, freezing rain. Allied aircraft couldn't fly. No resupply was possible. No reinforcements could arrive. Inside Bastogne, morale was actually holding up reasonably well. The soldiers were cold, hungry, and short on ammunition, but they were inflicting heavy casualties on German attackers. They were doing their job. They were holding the line. McAuliffe made a point of visiting frontline positions daily, often exposing himself to German sniper fire. He'd congratulate units that had repelled attacks. He'd check on wounded soldiers at aid stations. He maintained a calm, confident demeanor that reassured his troops. One soldier later recalled, "General Mac acted like being surrounded was no big deal. He'd visit your foxhole, ask how you were doing, tell you we were giving the Germans one hell of a beating. You believed him because he believed it." The German commanders were growing frustrated. They'd expected Bastogne to fall quickly. Instead, they were taking heavy casualties and making no progress. German units that were supposed to be racing toward Antwerp were stuck fighting for a single Belgian town. On December 22nd, General Heinrich von Ludwig, commander of the German XL 7th Panzer Corps, decided to try a different approach. He would demand the Americans surrender. 11:30 a.m., December 22nd, 1944. Private Leo Palma, a BAR gunner with Company F, 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, looks out of his foxhole and sees something strange. 4 German soldiers approaching with white flags. The Germans walk past an American bazooka team who hold fire because of the white flags. They reach Palma's position. One of the German officers, Lieutenant Helmut Henke, speaks English. He explains they have a message for the American commander. The 2 German officers are blindfolded and escorted to Company F's command post, about a quarter-mile away. The message is passed up the chain of command, from company to battalion to regiment to division headquarters in Bastogne. Rumors spread along the American lines. Soldiers speculate that the Germans are surrendering. The enemy has had enough. We're winning. The rumor mill is wrong. Lieutenant Colonel Ned Moore, the division's acting chief of staff, enters McAuliffe's sleeping quarters and wakes him up. McAuliffe had been sleeping, one of the few times he'd rested in days. Moore hands him the German message. It's typewritten, formal, in English. To the USA commander of the encircled town of Bastogne, the fortune of war is changing. This time, the USA forces in and near Bastogne have been encircled by strong German armored units. More German armored units have crossed the River Earth near Orthoville, have taken Marche and reached St. Hubert by passing through Humpre-Cibré-Tillet. Liebremont is in German hands. There is only one possibility to save the encircled USA troops from total annihilation. That is the honorable surrender of the encircled town. In order to think it over, a term of 2 hours will be granted, beginning with the presentation of this note. If this proposal should be rejected, 1 German artillery corps and 6 heavy AA battalions are ready to annihilate the USA troops in and near Bastogne. The order for firing will be given immediately after this 2 hours term. All the serious civilian losses caused by this artillery fire would not correspond with the well-known American humanity. The German commander, THE. McAuliffe reads it. His first reaction, he thinks the Germans are surrendering to him. When Moore clarifies that it's the other way around, the Germans want him to surrender, McAuliffe laughs. Then he gets angry. He reads the message again, crumples it into a ball, throws it in the wastepaper basket, and says, "Aw, nuts." He storms out of the headquarters to visit a unit on the western perimeter that had eliminated a roadblock earlier that morning. He wants to congratulate them personally. The officers left in the headquarters look at each other. The Germans are waiting for an official reply. What should they say? They tried drafting formal responses. Everything sounds too diplomatic, too weak. This situation demands something stronger. McAuliffe returns about 30 minutes later. The officers are still struggling with the response. McAuliffe sits down with a pencil and paper. "Well, I don't know what to tell them," he admits. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard speaks up. "That first crack you made would be hard to beat, sir." McAuliffe is confused. "What did I say?" "You said nuts, sir." The other officers laugh and applaud. It's perfect. It's defiant. It's unmistakably American. It captures exactly what McAuliffe and everyone in Bastogne feels about the German surrender demand. McAuliffe writes it down. "Have it typed up." A sergeant types the official response. "To the German commander, nuts, the American commander." Colonel Joseph Harper, commander of the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, is given the task of delivering the reply to the waiting German officers. Harper is escorted to where the 2 blindfolded Germans are waiting. The German officers are standing in the woods. Harper hands the typed message to Major Wagner. Wagner reads it. He's confused. He looks at Harper and asks in English, "Is the reply negative or affirmative?" Harper, who has a reputation for blunt speaking, responds, "The reply is decidedly not affirmative." Wagner still doesn't understand. "Is it negative?" Harper loses patience. "If you continue this foolish attack, your losses will be tremendous." Wagner presses. "But what does nuts mean?" Harper thinks for a moment and then delivers what would become the secondary famous quote of Bastogne. "In plain English, go to hell." The German officers understand that clearly enough. They're blindfolded again and escorted back to their own lines. The surrender ultimatum has been rejected. The Germans have their answer. Harper returns to American lines. Word spreads quickly about McAuliffe's reply. Soldiers love it. It's exactly the kind of defiant, no-nonsense response they would expect from their general. Back at German headquarters, von Lüttwitz is reportedly furious. He'd expected the surrounded Americans to surrender meekly. Instead, they've told him to go to hell. True to the ultimatum's threat, German artillery begins a massive bombardment of Bastogne. For the next several hours, hundreds of shells rain down on the town. But the bombardment doesn't change anything. The American defensive perimeter holds. That night, the Luftwaffe begins a sustained bombing campaign. German bombers attack Bastogne for 4 consecutive nights, reducing much of the town's center to rubble. Civilian casualties mount, but the American soldiers in their foxholes outside town are relatively safe. The bombing is concentrated on the town itself, not the defensive positions. McAuliffe's nuts reply would become one of the most famous quotes in American military history. It was everything a wartime quote should be: brief, memorable, defiant, and perfectly suited to the moment. But the men in the foxholes around Bastogne weren't thinking about history. They were thinking about survival, because after rejecting the surrender ultimatum, they knew the Germans would attack with everything they had. Let me tell you about some of the individual soldiers who made Bastogne work. Private First Class Vincent Speranza, age 19, from Staten Island, New York, son of Italian immigrants. Machine gunner with Company H, 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment. On December 19th, the second day of the siege, Speranza was manning a machine gun in a foxhole outside Bastogne. German artillery was pounding American positions. During one barrage, shrapnel hit his friend Joe Willis in both legs. Willis was evacuated to a makeshift aid station set up in a bombed-out church, the only building in Bastogne with walls still standing. 2 days later, on December 21st, Speranza went to Bastogne to pick up radio batteries. He decided to visit Willis at the church aid station. The church was horrific. Wounded men everywhere. One doctor and one nurse for dozens of casualties. The doctor was performing surgery by candlelight, without morphine. Men were dying from wounds that would have been treatable with proper medical facilities. Willis was conscious. He looked at Speranza and said, "Vince, I'm so thirsty. Can you get me some water?" Speranza's canteen was empty. Water was being rationed. He told Willis he'd try. Walking through the ruined town, he passed several destroyed taverns. Most were completely demolished. But in the third tavern he checked, climbing over debris, he found something unexpected: a working beer tap. He pulled the handle. Beer flowed. But there were no containers. All the glasses had been destroyed by bombing. Speranza looked around and made a decision that would make him famous 65 years later. He took off his helmet, the same helmet he used as a latrine in his foxhole, and filled it with beer. He carefully duck-walked back to the church, trying not to spill any. When he arrived, Willis's eyes lit up. Speranza passed the helmet around to the wounded soldiers. Their spirits lifted immediately. The beer wasn't medical treatment, but it was comfort. It was a moment of normalcy in hell. When the helmet was empty, the wounded men asked for more. So Speranza made a second trip to the tavern, filled his helmet again, and returned to the church. On his second delivery, he was intercepted by the regimental surgeon, who exploded in anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing, soldier? You're going to kill these men. Some have abdominal wounds. Do you want to be shot?" Speranza saluted, put his helmet back on his head, causing the remaining beer to cascade down his uniform, and ran back to his foxhole. But the wounded soldiers never forgot. Neither did the Belgian civilians who witnessed Speranza's beer run through the burning town. 65 years later, in 2009, Speranza returned to Bastogne for the first time since the war. He was having lunch with 2 European military officers when he casually mentioned the beer in helmet story. The officers looked at each other and ordered a round of airborne beer. The waiter brought bottles featuring a label with a U.S. paratrooper carrying a helmet full of beer, and he served it in ceramic bowls shaped like M1 helmets. Speranza was stunned. He'd thought the incident was insignificant, long forgotten. Instead, it became local legend. A Belgian brewery had created an entire beer brand to commemorate his act. After being a machine gunner at the Battle of the Bulge, winning a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star, and 2 decades as a public school teacher, airborne beer is what I'm famous for, Speranza said. Vincent Speranza survived Bastogne and the war. He became a high school history teacher. He married, raised a family, and lived a quiet life until his wife died in 2017. Only then did he start speaking publicly about his war experiences. He published a book in 2014, Nuts, a 101st Airborne Division machine gunner at Bastogne. Vincent Speranza died on August 2, 2023, at age 98. He was one of the last survivors of the Bastogne siege. His story illustrates something important about the defense of Bastogne. It wasn't just about tactics and firepower. It was about soldiers taking care of each other. Small acts of humanity in brutal conditions. Finding moments of connection and compassion when everything else was death and destruction. Speranza's beer run didn't stop German tanks, but it mattered to the wounded men in that church. And sometimes, that's enough. December 23, 1944. Dawn. Soldiers in their foxholes around Bastogne look up and see something they haven't seen in a week. Blue sky. The weather is clearing. Within hours, the roar of aircraft engines fills the air. C-47 transport planes, escorted by P-47 Thunderbolt fighters, appear over Bastogne. The first aerial resupply mission begins at 9 a.m. Paratroopers watch as supply containers drift down on colorful parachutes, red, blue, yellow, white. It's the most beautiful sight they've seen in days. The containers hold ammunition, medical supplies, food, and, critically, plasma and morphine for the wounded. Ground crews race to recover the containers. Some land inside American lines. Some land in no man's land and have to be retrieved under German fire. A few land in German-held territory and are lost. But enough gets through. By the end of December 23rd, over 241 tons of supplies have been dropped on Bastogne. Artillery batteries that had been down to single-digit rounds now have hundreds. Machine gunners have full ammunition belts. The wounded can finally receive proper pain medication. And the P-47 Thunderbolts that escorted the transports stick around to hunt German tanks. The German Panzers had been painted in summer camouflage, green and brown. Against the snow-covered landscape, they stand out like targets on a shooting range. The P-47s dive-bomb German armor columns, destroying tanks faster than German repair crews can replace them. The German offensive around Bastogne begins to stall, but the siege isn't over. The Germans still control all roads into town. American forces inside Bastogne are still surrounded, still outnumbered. The weather could turn bad again at any moment. 60 miles to the south, Lieutenant General George S. Patton's Third Army is executing one of the most remarkable military maneuvers in American history. Patton had been preparing an offensive toward the Saar region when the German attack began. Within 48 hours, he pivoted his entire army 90 degrees and began racing north toward Bastogne. 3 full divisions, over 130,000 men and 20,000 vehicles moving through winter weather on narrow roads under constant German artillery fire. Military historians consider this maneuver one of Patton's finest achievements. Changing an army's direction of march while maintaining operational effectiveness is extraordinarily difficult. Doing it in winter, under enemy fire, in 48 hours, was unprecedented. Patton's 4th Armored Division led the advance. Their objective, break through German lines south of Bastogne and relieve the 101st. On December 26th, at approximately 4:45 p.m., Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commander of the 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armored Division, watched supply parachutes falling on Bastogne from a hill south of the village of Ardennes. Abrams turned to his tank crews and said, "We're going in." The 37th Tank Battalion, spearheaded by a Sherman tank nicknamed Cobra King, attacked toward Bastogne. They fought through German defensive positions, destroyed several German tanks, and at approximately 4:50 p.m., Cobra King made contact with American forces from the 101st Airborne on the southern perimeter. The siege was broken. McAuliffe, braving German sniper fire, ventured out to the front lines to personally greet Abrams and his tanks. The meeting was brief. Both men were professionals, and there was still fighting to do. But McAuliffe made sure to thank Abrams and his troops. Days later, General Patton arrived in Bastogne. He personally awarded McAuliffe the Distinguished Service Cross, pinning it on his uniform in front of assembled troops. But here's the part that annoyed the 101st Airborne for decades afterward. Newspapers reported that Patton's Third Army had rescued the surrounded paratroopers. The soldiers of the 101st violently disagreed with that characterization. At a press conference after the siege was lifted, McAuliffe was asked about being rescued. He bristled visibly. "We didn't need rescuing," he said. "We held. We never asked for help. The only thing we screamed about was getting surgeons for casualties." The soldiers felt the same way. They'd held Bastogne against overwhelming odds. They'd stopped 4 German divisions. They'd inflicted massive casualties on the enemy. They hadn't been rescued. They'd been reinforced so they could go on the offensive. The rescued narrative became a point of lasting irritation between the 101st Airborne and Patton's Third Army. But it was mostly good-natured rivalry. Both forces had done their jobs brilliantly. Together, they'd wrecked Hitler's last major offensive. The Battle of the Bulge continued for another month, but after Bastogne held, the German offensive was doomed. They'd lost too many tanks, too much fuel, and too many experienced soldiers. American and British forces counterattacked and pushed the Germans back to their original lines by late January 1945. The cost was staggering. American casualties in the Battle of the Bulge: 19,276 killed, 47,493 wounded, and 23,218 missing. German casualties were similar or higher. Estimates range from 67,000 to 100,000 total. For the 101st Airborne specifically, casualties from December 19, 1944 to January 6, 1945, 341 killed, 1,691 wounded, and 516 missing. The town of Bastogne was devastated. Much of the town center was reduced to rubble. Civilian casualties numbered in the hundreds. It would take years to rebuild. But the strategic objective was achieved. The Germans didn't capture Bastogne, they didn't reach Antwerp, their offensive failed. And after losing so many tanks, so much fuel, and so many experienced soldiers, Germany's ability to defend against the final Allied advance into Germany was crippled. Bastogne mattered. Holding that town for 8 days changed the outcome of the battle, which changed the timeline of the war's end. The legacy, what Bastogne means. So what does Bastogne tell us about warfare, leadership, and human resilience? First, it demonstrates the importance of small unit leadership and soldier initiative. The defense of Bastogne wasn't won by grand strategy. It was won by individual soldiers in foxholes making split-second decisions, by squad leaders adapting to impossible situations, by junior officers holding their units together under conditions that should have broken morale. McAuliffe's leadership mattered, absolutely. His calm confidence, his daily visits to frontline positions, his willingness to trust his junior officers. All of that was critical, but he couldn't be everywhere at once. The defense ultimately depended on thousands of individual soldiers doing their jobs without supervision, often without orders, because they understood what needed to be done. Second, Bastogne shows the value of combined arms integration. The defense worked because infantry, artillery, armor, and tank destroyers functioned as an integrated system. Artillery provided the killing power. Infantry held the line. Armor provided mobile reserves. Tank destroyers stopped German armor. No single element could have held alone. Together, they were nearly unbeatable. Third, Bastogne illustrates the critical importance of logistics and supply. The weather clearing on December 23rd wasn't a miracle, it was meteorology, but it had miraculous effects. Resupply meant the defenders could continue fighting. Air support meant German armor became vulnerable. The tactical situation changed dramatically within hours, not because strategy changed, but because beans and bullets arrived. Modern military doctrine emphasizes logistics for exactly this reason. Battles are won or lost based on who has ammunition when it matters. Fourth, Bastogne demonstrates that morale is tangible and measurable. The soldiers defending Bastogne were cold, hungry, outnumbered, and short on ammunition. By any rational assessment, they should have been demoralized. Instead, they fought with extraordinary determination. Why? Partly because they believed in their cause, partly because they trusted their leaders, partly because they didn't want to let down the soldiers next to them, and partly because they were winning. They were inflicting heavy casualties on German attackers and holding their ground. Morale isn't just about speeches and pep talks. It's about soldiers seeing that their efforts produce results. Every German attack that was repelled reinforced the belief that the defense would succeed. Finally, Bastogne reminds us that wars are fought by individual human beings, not by statistics and casualty reports. Vincent Speranza's beer run, the wounded soldiers in the church who found a moment of comfort, the machine gunners in frozen foxholes who held fire until German soldiers were at point-blank range, the artillery crews who fired until their barrels glowed red-hot. These were real people. Many were teenagers. Most had never wanted to be soldiers. They were farmers, factory workers, high school students. And when their country asked them to stand in a frozen forest in Belgium and hold a line against impossible odds, they did it. 341 of them died doing it. 1,691 were wounded. 516 went missing. We remember Bastogne not just for the tactical victory, but for what it represents. Ordinary people performing extraordinary acts of courage when the stakes were the highest. Today, if you visit Bastogne, you'll find a town that hasn't forgotten. The central square is named Place General McAuliffe. A Sherman tank pierced by a German 88mm shell stands in one corner. The Bastogne War Museum tells the story of the siege through immersive exhibits. The Martison Memorial, shaped like a five-pointed American star, honors the American soldiers who fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Every December, Bastogne hosts commemorations. Veterans return, fewer each year as the greatest generation passes, and are treated as heroes. Local families have adopted the graves of American soldiers who died in the battle. Belgian children learn about the siege in school. And in the taverns of Bastogne, you can order Airborne beer, served in ceramic, helmet-shaped bowls, commemorating a 19-year-old machine gunner who filled his helmet with beer for wounded soldiers 80 years ago. The people of Bastogne remember because what happened there mattered. Not just strategically, though it did matter strategically, but personally. American soldiers held their town when it could have been destroyed. Many of those soldiers died doing it. The people of Bastogne haven't forgotten that sacrifice. Neither should we. The Siege of Bastogne lasted 8 days, December 18th to December 26th, 1944. 8 days that changed the trajectory of the war. 8 days that demonstrated what American soldiers could accomplish when pushed to their absolute limit. When the German commander demanded surrender, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe had a choice. He could have written a formal military reply declining the ultimatum. He could have ignored it. He could have tried to negotiate better terms for his surrounded troops. Instead, he threw the demand in the trash and said, "Nuts." That one word, that single defiant syllable, became the answer to a larger question. Would the United States Army break when hit with Hitler's last desperate offensive? The answer was no. Nuts. Go to hell. We're not breaking. We're not surrendering. We're holding this town, and you can throw everything you have at us, and we'll still be here when the snow clears. They were right. If you found this story compelling, hit that subscribe button. We bring you verified military history, the real stories of ordinary soldiers in extraordinary circumstances. No fiction, just facts. More content like this coming your way. Leave a comment. What aspect of the Siege of Bastogne surprised you most? What other World War II battles should we cover? Let me know below. Thanks for watching. Remember Bastogne. Remember the soldiers who held when everyone else said they should fall. Nuts!